Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down here in the catacombs for the Remnant Underground. There's been an awful lot of bad news lately with respect to Pope Francis and some of the problematic things that the Holy Father has said in various interviews over the past few months. One thing that I've noticed is that there seems to be a willingness on the part of traditionalists to overlook some of the things the Holy Father has said, which one could argue are mitigating or are more favorable. There's a lot of dissatisfaction, and I think there's a lot of cynicism, and I think it's important that we look whenever possible to what the Holy Father is saying that allows us to have the opportunity to not just allow the left or the liberals to interpret everything and to sort of seize everything and own everything that's coming out of the Vatican right now. I don't see how that serves us, our cause, or the Church. So, a case in point is the greeting that the Holy Father sent to the Summorum Pontificum pilgrims just about a week and a half ago in Rome that I don't think has gotten any press coverage at all, and I'm kind of curious as to why that would be. Everyone has been wondering what the Holy Father is going to do with the traditional Latin Mass, what he is going to do with the Benedictine reforms of the liturgy that were in full swing when Pope Benedict unfortunately resigned. In my opinion, may have been forced to resign, but that's for another show. But the main thing to realize is that during this pilgrimage, the Holy Father did in fact send a greeting to the traditional Latin Mass pilgrims as Cardinal Castian Hoyos was offering the traditional Latin Mass in the second most prominent altar in St. Peter's Basilica, the altar of the chair. We were all surprised that he actually sent through his Secretary of State the following greeting. He says, the Holy Father, through the Secretary of State, says, "On the occasion of the pilgrimage to Rome of the Coitus Internationalis Summorum Pontificum, in the context of the Year of Faith, His Holiness Pope Francis presents his cordial greeting, desiring that taking part in the devout journey to the tombs of the apostles may arouse fervent adhesion to Christ, celebrated in the Eucharist and in the public cult of the Church, and may give a renewed impulse to evangelical testimony. The Supreme Pontiff, invoking the gifts of the Divine Spirit and the maternal protection of the Mother of God, imparts from his heart to your eminence, Cardinal Hoyos, to the prelates, to the priests, and to all the faithful present at the sacred celebration of the apostolic benediction, favorable to peace and spiritual fervor that has been requested." End quote. This doesn't end the discussion with respect to what Pope Francis, who does not seem overly disposed to the traditional Latin Mass, it does not end the discussion as to what he's going to do in the future. The prevailing opinion in Rome is that the Holy Father will simply allow the status quo to continue. He won't particularly support the traditional Latin Mass. On the other hand, he is not apt to attack it or to stop or undo Summorum Pontificum. Please God, may that be the case. But speaking to tradition-minded Catholics, I think we do have to avoid a certain pitfall or a certain trap, which would have us join the left, if you will, in piling on every time the Holy Father says or does something that is not necessarily in accord with what we believe the Holy Father should be saying and doing, that we sort of add our voices of dissent to those who are gleeful and very much celebrating the fact that the Holy Father seems to be drifting in a more liberal direction. So when he says or does something that is constructive, that is helpful, that is Catholic, that we can use, in other words, I think tradition-minded Catholics have to be there, support the Holy Father, and point out the fact is, as this quotation illustrates, the fact that it got no news coverage that I'm aware of, the press is only interested in what Pope Francis has to say that serves their agenda. And I think it's very important that tradition-minded Catholics do not become sort of the water carriers for the left, allowing them to sort of interpret everything that's happening now in the Vatican with a more liberal Pope, admittedly, according to their cause. Whenever, wherever possible, tradition-minded Catholics have to get together and stop thinking about just supporting our own blogs or our own websites or our own little personal opinion about where we should be going to Mass, whether it's Fraternity of St. Peter, Diocesan Society of Pius X, and allow that to continue to keep us in a constant state of polarization, which is precisely what the enemies of the Church, in my opinion, want to see happen. We have to realize where we are in the timeline of history. The people that are against our Church, that are agitating against, and for the moment they're using Pope Francis to whatever extent they can, but they're trying to agitate against the Catholic voice in society, the moral authority of the Church. We have to make sure we don't go along with that agenda, because of for obvious reasons. And so we have to become aware of the fact that the enemies of the church really and truly do want to silence the Catholic Church. They want to shut us up. They're playing for real. I don't think we always are in the blogs and in the internet and with the social network and so forth. Oftentimes it seems like we're serving our own small little agenda when our own little narrative is what we want to put forward. What the problem is, the enemy doesn't see it that way. The problem is the enemy is using quote-unquote real bullets. They're actually at war. They're not playing around. So I'm reminded of the old comedy film from 30 years ago almost, The Three Amigos, in which you have this ridiculous scenario whereby three actors find themselves south of the border in Mexico, thinking under the impression that they're putting on a movie, they're making a movie, when in fact they're up against a real bad guy, a guy named El Guapo who wants to kill them. I think it's become so appropriate in a way, this sort of funny analogy of what's happening with traditional Catholics, how I think we're dropping the ball to a large extent, that it might be worth taking a look at the clip, a clip from that movie from 30 years ago, to sort of show at least what we shouldn't become, and hopefully to, if it, in fact that's already where we are, to try to do something about it. Let's just take a look at that clip and see if it's not appropriate.
I like these guys. They're funny guys. Arriba! Just kill one of them. Hold it! Hold it! Lucky? Jeez, you all right? What happened? I don't know. Oh. Gee. Ooh, jeez. Ow! Ow! Ooh! What? Oh! Ow! Oh!
Wait a second. Let me see that. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, great! Real bullets!
Oh,
Well, I'll keep this. You're in a lot of trouble, mister. Excuse me. It's real. What? This is real.
you mean
Yes. They're going to kill us.
All right, that's just a silly old movie from the 1980s. I recognize that. But it's interesting. I mean, it's applicable to us today because we really and truly are at war. We really do have a lot of big, scary El Guapos out there trying to shut the Catholic Church down. And it's incredibly counterproductive for tradition-minded Catholics to be warring against one another or to be trying always and forever to find the very worst things that are happening in order to support our little blogs or our little group or whatever. So when Pope Francis says something good, I think it's very important that we acknowledge that. And that doesn't mean that we have lost sight of the fact that we do have what appears to be a liberal sitting in the throne of St. Peter. But on the other hand, you know, the conspiracy nuts who want to say that Pope Francis is, you know, whatever, a Freemason, he is probably the trigger man on the grassy knoll who shot John F. Kennedy, or he's the mastermind behind 9/11. All of this sort of stuff may be fun to play with on blogs and on the blogosphere, but really it's time for tradition-minded Catholics to come together with a strategy that's effective. And in order to have that effective, we have to have some leniency with respect to the various camps within traditional Catholicism. We need to recognize that if you get far enough over to the left, all the traditionalists, whether they're in the Fraternity of St. Peter, Pius X, Institute of Christ the King, diocesan, tradition-minded priests, all of them are bomb-throwing crazy people that need to be silenced and need to be shut up in order to stifle the true Catholic voice in the public square. And once we realize that, perhaps we can come up with a more constructive strategy with respect to how we forge ahead. And part of the way that we forge ahead effectively, I think, is to not cede the entire thing that's happening in the Vatican with Pope Francis over to the far left. Let them interpret everything that comes out. But instead, if something is said that does mitigate a former statement of the Holy Fathers as problematic, we have to stress that just as much as there is the temptation to stress those things which are novel and which are experimental and problematic for the cause of Catholic tradition and restoration. It's just a small point. It's not a huge thing, but I think that traditionalists can do a much better job trying to formulate a better coalition and trying to do a better job defending the church, defending the teachings of the church at a time when they're under attack at every level in society. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time at the Remnant Underground. I am Michael Matt, and good night.